welcome. If we could all get settled in. My name is Conray Wharff. I'm the current chairman of the Lake Boon Commission. I'm joined by Lee Heron on my right and Theresa O'Riordan on the left. The meeting's going to be pretty focused on a public forum. Before we go into that, there's going to be a couple other issues. We have some guests here. Mike Saliese with the Stow Police Department. Wolski. Wolski. And Marri Walker from the Environmental Police. And they're going to be answering your questions. Mary's going to do a short presentation and talking about Mass General laws, and then they're going to take questions from the floor. In terms of, wait a minute, let me get my meetings. In terms of the meeting, it's an open format meeting, which means all meetings, public meetings are open. Open meeting law doesn't mean everybody gets to talk whenever they want to. It means you get to listen and know what's going on. During the open forum section of the meeting, we will take comments one at a time. We'll ask people to get in the line over here by the microphone, talk one at a time. We'd like everybody that wants to talk to get a chance to talk before anybody else gets to talk a second time. I'm being told that these microphones are sensitive. You've got to get very close to them. And the reason for that is we're all on TV tonight. So this is being recorded. And the other reason for that is there's some people in the audience that need the hearing help, and they're getting what comes off the microphones, right? So we don't want to yell at them, hurt their ears, but we want to make sure they can hear us. So when we get to there's no decisions or no changes that are going to happen tonight. So if you came expecting a big discussion about what rule changes might happen, that's not the agenda. The agenda is to listen to the environmental and state police and the local police, and they're going to explain what the law is. I will moderate the meeting, so questions will come through the chair. They'll be answered to my left, to your right. Everybody gets to speak once before anybody gets to speak twice. If possible, limit to 2 questions per person and try to make it brief. If you have a question that's already been answered, there's probably no reason to get up and ask it again. And I think that's good. So I'm going to start by giving this to Theresa. Well, Theresa has a sign-up sheet. So if you're interested in want further information, you can sign up. And if you give us an email, we'll create an email distribution list. And if we have any, we'll let you know when future meetings are and anything that might happen after tonight. Right. And just what you all wanted and needed, there's a box of regulations. What do we do with them?
They're on the entryway.
So if you want to pick up one of the booklets that explains the law, they're up there for you. So I'm going to turn this over to Theresa. She's going to talk about drawdown for a minute. The weed person, got to be careful about that, right, Mike? The person that's been managing weed mitigation on the lake is stuck in traffic in Boston, so we may skip that one.
All right, the report on the drawdown for this year is that it went really well. The boards were pulled in the end of September and the middle of October, and it took about a month to draw down the lake, and it stayed at the low level until ice out happened twice this winter, which is something unusual, and I've never seen that in 13 years. And it took less than 4 weeks for the ice to return to normal summer levels. I know that's something everybody is always curious about. I was on vacation while it was refilling, so I'm not exactly sure how long it took, but it was less than 4 weeks. So that's all I had to say. There were no issues at all this year, which I am very happy to report.
Thank you, Theresa. Since Andy's not here, Andy is a volunteer on the commission, and we're always looking for volunteers that want to help, by the way. And he's been managing the contracting and delivery of the weed management on the lake. So we've treated the lake for the first time on May 11th. and that'll continue to happen over the next 6 weeks or so. And the funding was approved in both towns, so we have the money to do it. It's a yearly thing now. It's pretty much just codified. So with that, I'd kind of like to say anybody that is interested in the open forum, microphone is there. Please try to limit your time at the mic to a couple of minutes, and a couple, 3 minutes, and a couple of questions. Who would like to go first? Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Don. I almost forgot. Mary Walker.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting us. Our role here as the Massachusetts Environmental Police is to help try to hopefully provide some clarity to any questions that you may have relative to the boating laws as they pertain to you on your lake. And we're not going to provide you with a boating safety course tonight. We've done that historically for you folks over the years. We're going to be working with the Stow Police Department out there on the waterways. If there's any issues, we'll try to schedule routine or regular patrols out here through the course of the summer, and we'll see how it goes. So I guess the best role that we could provide you with this evening is to answer any specific questions that you folks may have and see if we can't help with any clarity to any questions that you have. Would anybody like to start? Questions?
I'm Don Hawks from Lake Boon. I think the main question, just to kick it off, is please explain to us about we have had for a long time here what we believed was an appropriate 75-foot limit. And I think most people here tonight have heard various things about it, and as a long-term resident, I'm confused about it, and I imagine a lot of other people are. So please tell us what the law that you folks will be enforcing may differ from that, and why.
Great. Good to see you, Mr. Hawks. A little bit about myself. I was fortunate enough actually to be a patrol officer assigned to this area probably back around late 1980s, early 1990s. So I actually was one of the officers that have done patrols on Lake Boon as an environmental police officer over the years. So I'm somewhat familiar, although it probably hasn't changed terribly much in the last 20 years or so. But I am familiar with the area. Historically, how this has worked from our perspective is, as state enforcement officers, we have always enforced just the state law. This current state law was put into effect roughly about 1989, with the current rules and regulations as they read now, which this is the booklet that we've handed out to you, and it's been reproduced over the years, but substantively, the state law has not changed. Historically, what has happened by the way, Stow, the town of Stow is not the only community that this is germane to, is since the state law went into, the regulatory changes went into effect around 1989, what had happened is they supersede now any of your local rules and regulations. And so historically, it takes a number of years for towns and communities to catch up to the changes in the state law. And basically, that's where we are. This is somewhat of I wouldn't say it's a perennial issue here in Stow, but it's not a new issue. I know that we dealt with it back in 1994 when I was here as a sergeant, as a patrol officer, and discussed it at that point in time and said your 75-foot rule back in the early 90s was not compliant at that point in time to the changes that went into effect in 1989. So here we are again. The rules and regulations relative to, and specifically, the 75-foot offset rule is not compliant with the current state regulations, which is 150 feet. And that pertains to the operation of vessels beyond headway speed, is what the state refers to as a safe distance from shoreline. So if you're going to be beyond headway speed, which is the slowest speed which you can go, to maintain steerage, but yet not to exceed 6 miles per hour, you're to be 150 feet away from shore, and those things that you would find along shore. Swimmers, beach areas being used as swim areas, if you will, moorings, rafts, and floats, moored vessels. I think that's the crux of the issue. I'm not hearing an awful lot of discussion from Stow Police Department nor the Lake Association relative to any of the other regulations that went into effect in 1989. It seems to be this discrepancy between 75 feet or 150 feet. Is that correct? Are there any other concerns? And if there's a specific question, is there one that I can answer? And I hope, does that answer your question?
So the headway speed, whether or not you are pulling a skier, that doesn't affect the matter. Anything more, with or without a skier, you have to be 150 feet at headway, more than headway speed.
When we talk about a skier, that's something that's obviously, and I guess we'll try to break it down somewhat. When we talk about a water skier, that is a person generally that's on a set of skis being towed behind a vessel, and that generally that's 75 feet tow rope behind the vessel. So yeah, that includes that activity and the length of that line, that person behind that vessel. So the 150-foot rule applies not only to the vessel, but to the skier as well. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Sir.
Now, the question I have is, this is a state law that supersedes the lake rules that have been here since
1941.
41, whatever.
And by the way, I was not actually here in 1941.
Okay, well, since the time you were here, I would say there are quite a few more horsepower on the lake than there were during the time you were here. But the question I have is, if the Lake Boon Commission is authorized by the state, are they authorized to enforce the state rules, the state law?
No.
Then who is?
The agency that can enforce state law would be us, and the other agency that obviously enforces the law within your community is your local police department.
Okay.
On South Hale Road, so I just have a question. When we moved here about 10 years ago, we went to the town. We did a lot of research. We wanted to live on a lake that we could water ski on, so we went to the town and asked them, and they said, absolutely, you can water ski within 75 feet from shore. So now it sounds like that's not the case, which I kind of get. Where you're coming from totally makes sense. It's right here in the book. I mean, does the town have any responsibility or liability for that decision if we can't no longer perform the activities that we moved here specifically to do?
I really can't answer that question for you. I'm sorry.
Can anyone from the town representative, LBC or the police or anyone?
Kent, we'll have to take that one into the future. We can't answer that here.
Okay. And since there's no line, if I just to follow up to Mr. Gray's question, which I thought was a great question. So what happens if the police boat doesn't run, which is frequently, and you guys aren't here every day? Does chaos ensue if the LBC can no longer patrol the lake? Or is it just common sense? Because that doesn't really work.
Again, I'll defer that to Dr. Saliese.
So we are working, our boat is working. Here we go. Can everybody hear me? Okay. So our boat is working. It will be in the water within this week. I believe the Lake Boon Commission boat is working and is in the water. This is not, we do have a plan. It's not going to be chaos. We are going to have a Lake Boon patrol officer like we've always had. That's the plan that we're trying to put into place now. So there will be patrolling, as well as the environmental police will supplement that patrol officer. And we'll also be out there too. It'll be what our plan is right now is we're working on getting one of our reserve officers appointed as a Lake Boon patrol officer. So they'll be just assigned and to continue keeping the community relations, patrolling, enforcing the laws, and doing what they've always done. Whether they're in the Lake Boon Commission boat or the Stow Police boat, that's still to be determined. But our boat is running, and it will be in the water.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hi, Chris Cravelin. So I'm wondering, when you're out patrolling either of are you going to be enforcing our current regulations or the state regulations?
So from our perspective, we enforce both. We enforce both the Massachusetts general laws, and we also enforce the bylaws.
Okay, so when one is, let's talk about the 150, because I know we have some bylaws that aren't touched by the state laws.
Correct.
So the 150 feet rule under headway, more than headway, is that a rule that you'll be taking the state law, or you'll be taking our current bylaws?
We'll be taking the state law.
Okay.
Because we have to enforce what the state law says, and if there's a conflict, we have to go with the state law. That's what we have to enforce.
Okay. Thanks.
Hi. So I have a question. Laura Amichetti, 9 Hale Road. Amichetti. So I, like Mr. Scythe, am in the same setting where I knew what I was buying into, so we'll go take that offline, I guess, with the town and real estate and all of that. But my question is my basin. I don't actually know where I go to find out how wide it is, I'm on the second basin. Can I no longer speed past headway on that basin?
It all depends on, like, Basin 2 is quite large, right? It goes from
That's
the
what I
nose.
think. Yeah, I think I can still
But I'm saying that the length of it, so there's different parts you'd have to look at, and there's wider parts than other parts, so it goes from wide to narrow, and you'd have to look at, like, where you are and make sure.
How do I know, though?
And maybe
I'm not going to be out there with a measuring tape.
Maybe I can help. Suffice to say that the speed limit on 495 is 55, 65 miles an hour.
Yep.
There are clearly times where you can go up to 55, 65 miles an hour. And there are probably times when you can't.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to ask you a question. When would it not be realistic to go beyond, say, 45 miles an hour or 25 miles an hour on 495?
Traffic,
So
weather,
now we can
things
draw
like
a clear correlation between traffic with motor vehicles and traffic with vessels on a waterway. So if you have traffic density on a waterway, is it reasonable and prudent, because that is the state standard for speed, to go up to 45 miles an hour? Perhaps there's times where that speed, even at 45, needs to be less based on traffic density, the amount of boats that are out there, and the propensity or for other traffic to be there.
I know what you're saying, but it's not like if there's a lot of cars. I drive in rush hour on 495 every day on both
So
directions.
we take a look at the total of the circumstances.
Speed limit.
How many vessels may be out there at that particular time that you're operating, the distance that you are operating from shore, the activity that you're engaged in, and as well as the wake that your vessel may or may not generate at that particular given time and distance. Because the wake that you generate is legally part of your boat.
Right.
So if you're out there on a beautiful, bright, hopefully someday, sunny afternoon when it's warm,
Yeah.
and there's an awful lot of other folks that are out there, it may not be reasonable and prudent for you to go up to 30 or 40 miles an hour based on all of those prevailing circumstances.
Okay. So, but it sounds like there's nothing clear cut. It's basically what's prudent and safe for the environment, is what I'm hearing.
Correct.
But that our basin is large enough to pull skiers and do such, just as long as it's prudently safe and we're being careful with how many boats are out there and such.
Right. Remember, your most hopefully important responsibility is the welfare of the passengers in your boat and
the people in the lake, absolutely.
And that person that's 75 feet behind your boat being towed at whatever speed you're towing them. You're responsible for their safety.
I am a pure rider, so I am 100% with you. I don't drive. So
Again,
I'm with you, but
your biggest responsibility is
like
for the safety and the welfare of the persons in your boat and that person behind you, in correlation to all of that other activity that may be going on the lake at that time.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Stay up, Marri. Good to see you after, here we are again 20 years later, 23 years later.
All things that are old become new again.
Same issue off Davis Road. Let me open Pandora's box and just put it bluntly, and I think that's what everybody here is really after. Orchard Point, or what we call Orchard Point, the narrowing portion of the second basin where it breaks into the narrow part, roughly 300 feet, 350 feet, 360 feet at its average point. It is not the EP's, and I will defer back to Stow, who is going to be running around for 8 hours a week in the boat. It's not the intent to close off that portion of the basin from at speed water skiing, provided that it's safe and prudent. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
Thank you.
Richard Cummings, Davis Road. I'd just like some clarification. You stated in your opening remarks that it was 150 feet from shoreline. And I don't know if you were speaking in your general perception or if you have a specific law in the state law, because I looked through I thought all of the laws that pertain to boating on the lakes, and all I could come up with was 150 feet from swimmers or swimming areas, which also was not a very clear definition.
Correct.
So is it from all shores, or is it from swimmers and swimming areas?
Swimmers areas, moored vessels, rafts, and floats, which generally are within, oddly enough, 150 feet of shoreline.
Okay, so a follow-up then is what a swimming area is. If there's someone swimming there, then it's from them anyways.
Correct.
If there's nobody swimming there, then it's not a swimming area, and that widens the...
Again, we try to use that reasonable and prudent person. Would that person believe at that time, on that particular afternoon, that that looks like a swimming area? Is there a potential that the person that's standing on the beach, near the beach, may enter into the beach and become the swimmer? There are no clear definitions of what constitutes that activity. Well, that definition, but suffice to say, it's based more on the activity.
Okay, thank you.
Michelle Walsh, 76 Pine Point Road. I just was hoping to get some clarification, since it sounds like this state law has been since 1989. I don't live on the lake. I just bought a house here 3 years ago so that my children could water ski. And I'm about to sell my house in Groton to live here full time. So not happy hearing this.
Was that a realtor pitch?
No, not at all. I don't do that. But I'm confused because I'm wondering why this has all of a sudden come up, because I'd never heard anything about it until all of a sudden. So that's number one. And number two,
and again, to answer your number one, I don't know either. Because it hasn't just come up to me. This has happened, on any lake or pond. Generally when there's, whether there's an event that had happened, or if there's an upswell of awareness of this particular regulation, or if there's been a change in practice. So it seems from my perspective that there may be a change in practice and the clarification of that practice, which is now clearly, we're all on the same page. I use the same term, same boat, but that would be kind of a bad pun in this situation. So that when we're going to be out there and enforcing the law, that would be us and the municipal police department, that we're all going to be, if you will, utilizing the same sheet of music, which would be that 150-foot distance.
Okay. So there was no event leading to this. This is just something that...
None that I'm aware of.
Somebody all of a sudden decided we should start, working through
Continuity of message, perhaps.
Okay, so with that, how do you know where you're 150? Are we going to start marking some more buoys? Because it's pretty difficult. I don't think most people are going to know where 150 feet are. I mean, I definitely don't.
The general rule of thumb when we're teaching a boating safety class is to take your 15-foot motorboat and times it by the length of your boat. So roughly about 10 boat lengths from shore. Okay. Is there a magic number? Is there a magic marker that we go out there with? Will we be sitting out there with a LiDAR? No. No. If unfortunately there is some unfortunate incident where there is an unfortunate accident and there's significant damage, property damage, or personal injury, yes, when we reconstruct the accident, yes, at that point in time, we will be out there with a LiDAR finding out exact distances.
Okay.
Hi, Bob Streeter, Hudson. I don't live on the lake. It seems that the state law would apply to all the lakes in Massachusetts. And I can think of many water skiing lakes, Lake Shirley, Lake Williams, Marlborough, Lake Webster, it would seem like every single lake is in violation and there's no water skiing allowed at all on every single lake in Massachusetts. And I hope if this is going to be enforced in Lake Boon, every single lake in Massachusetts shall be enforced, no water skiing.
We're not saying no water skiing, sir. What we're saying is reasonable distance from shore, respect for the use of the lake for all people that are on the lake, and the activity is regulated by such things as traffic density, the state of the wind, the water, and giving the parameters that you're operating on that particular day. Is that a safe and reasonable activity, distance from shore, and speed, in consideration of all things that are out there at that point in time? And the answer to your question is, yes, our agency patrols 351 cities and towns, the Atlantic Ocean out to 200 miles, and this conflict is not new to our agency, and we have dealt with this in many municipalities across the Commonwealth.
My name's Carolyn McDonald. I'm on at 76 North Shore Drive in Basin 2. I think one of the issues about the 150 foot is at the end of Basin 2, as you're moving toward Basin 1, there's a bottleneck there. And I'm not sure what the distance is from shore to shore. I've heard 300 feet. I've heard 313 feet. I think the gentleman that was up earlier said 350.
Keeps getting bigger, by the way.
I'm interested if we have anything that clarifies that distance. And I also would recommend that there be some buoys there, because I think there have been some incidents where swimmers have nearly been struck at that point. And I think, you know, something needs to be done to clarify that particular end of the lake.
To answer your first question, relative has that distance been measured, I would defer to either the Lake Commission or the municipal department.
We actually had it measured. And what was the instrument Steve used?
My husband has some precision winding equipment. He does fiber optic cables, so we measured out a cable and then brought it back to our house and gave a final, like he marked it, and then we measured it, and it was 318 feet as best we could measure it.
So, based on that answer, there's only 18 feet width for a boat that may be going 45 miles an hour to come
Under
in
optimal conditions.
Under optimal conditions, to come through that small, narrow area to do the turnaround. And as you know, a person that lives on the lake, I would really like to see some points, some buoys put in to demark that 18 foot so that it's being respected, because I don't think it is.
That's a very good point. And one other thing I'd like to say relative to the swimmer, much like when we're operating our motor vehicles, we have to operate them and keenly aware that all other activities may be taking place out on the water. And you may even have some folks, much like we have pedestrians when we're operating our motor vehicles, which we have to be keenly aware of, we may have swimmers in the water when we're operating our motorboats. And it's our responsibility as vessel operators to make sure that, you know, we're a safe distance away from them. The luxury, if you will have it as a luxury, when you're a pedestrian, you're yay tall, and hopefully that you're well marked when you're a pedestrian on a roadway. You're only about this tall when you're a swimmer in the water. And chances are most of us probably don't wear some type of reflective gear when we're a swimmer on the water. So as a boat operator, you keenly have to be aware of the fact that there's a whole host of activities that are out there that you need to be aware of and operate your vessel in a responsible manner.
Hi, Karen Pastic, 107 Hunter Ave. My question about the distance, now that we have a lot of docks out there and the distance of the docks from the shore and also the floating docks that have seemed to have grown from 20 feet out to, 100 or more, and it's really shrinking the lake because we don't have that distance anymore to make turns. So I was wondering if that is going to be addressed, whether they're going to start pushing the docks back, the floating apparatus back to 20 feet from shore, because that's one of the rules, I believe. And that way we'll have more distance to make our turns. I live in the second basin, so we have a lot of skiing activity that turns in front of my home.
Yeah, I would, that would be a Lake Boon Commission
Bonnie should know
comment on that one.
Thank you, Mike. Karen, the Lake Boon Commission rules are actually the bylaws of the two towns say that you can have a dock out to 20 feet, right, and beyond that it has to be permitted.
Right.
And some people have permitted their docks beyond that.
Absolutely.
So that's something we'll look at this summer.
Yeah, because I know it's been raised before and nothing's been done about it. It just cuts the lake short. As you know, you ski in front of my house all the time, so yeah, you know that turn there. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Hi, Tim Walsh, 76 Pine Point. Just as a point of reference, we're in the first basin, which is the inlet over near the causeway. We're the house that has the sandbar in front of it with that trampoline that I know many hate. But one of the reasons we got that trampoline was to keep people off the sandbar. So I actually took my golf rangefinder today, and from my shore, pointed it across. It's exactly 184 yards. So if you translate that to feet, basically 150 yards on each side, the middle portion of that is 85 yards. So roughly, the way I think about it, the length of a football field. So I've got to keep my boat and skier, and obviously you really can't ski in that inlet, but you can start in that inlet. But fair to say I can start skiing and just keep it in that football field. Fair? All right, I have a comment about the drawdown. So again, we've been here 3 years. We've got that sandbar. And it seems to me, and I actually took pictures of the docks around our house, and the water seems to be dropping. If I look at the point of reference, it's dropped about 3 to 4 inches. And maybe that was on purpose. Can you comment on that? One more thing. The swimmers. Is there, and I know it's not going to be a state law, but maybe a commission bylaw. Unfortunately, there are swimmers in the middle of the lake in the middle of the day. Doesn't happen often, but it does happen. So maybe we can put some type of rule in place that they have to have a buoy or something, so it's just easier for them to see. Thank you.
About the drawdown, it is very, very difficult to make everybody happy about the lake level. And those boards in the dam are what dictate the level, and the Stow Highway Department is the one who puts in and removes the boards under orders of the Lake Boon Commission and the Conservation Commission. We all kind of work together to decide when is the right time to pull them, when's the right time to put them back. And sometimes we cannot control the weather, and sometimes, although the boards might be in, there'll be a few inches of water still flowing over the top of it. So it's really difficult to, back when the Lake Boon Commission used to be in charge, we could we could pull the board whenever on a moment's notice, but now that we kind of have a group deciding what to do, it takes a little more effort. So we're doing the best we can, and sometimes those boards get destroyed when you take them out, and then they have to make new boards, so they're not always the same height from year to year. So please bear with us on the height. If it seems to be a bit of a difference in level, it might be that way this year, but then next year it might be more like how you want it. Just please give us a little bit of leeway with it. We're doing the best we can.
In reference to your trampoline, you have a permit for that. You have a permit for a buoy on the sandbar. You came to the commission, you were permitted for that, so that's an example of someone coming to the Lake Boon Commission, asking for a permit. We looked at it, it was reasonable, and we gave you a permit for that because it's a good idea to have not people run into that sandbar.
Ellen Craig, Kingland Road, Basin 1, and Theresa, thank you for your work on the drawdown. I think it's made a difference with weed control. I do hope Basin 1 gets considered for weed treatments once in a while. I know we're deeper, but we have problems. But I'm here to also say that the area by Indian Point, that's the narrowing section between the bigger part of Basin 2 and the second part of Basin 2. On Google Maps, it measures about 298 feet. I don't know what kind of special winding device you used, and I don't know if you're going by the Google Maps or if you go by your own measurements or if you go by the state map that shows Lake Boon, where the 150 border on either side touches in the middle. I don't know how you judge what that distance is, but it's a very narrow point, and it's at a blind corner with docks on either side. That's all. And on Basin 1, we're looking forward to seeing more water skiers. What was my question? My question was, how are you measuring that distance? Because I think that is a safety point. Do you go by Google Maps or the Mass State map?
Generally, what we'll do is we'll start with the Fish and Wildlife maps. They had done, historically, they have looked at lakes and ponds in the Commonwealth and more or less, I wouldn't say they've charted them, but they have mapped them. And then we'll utilize, again, given the lake circumstances that particular time, if there is an unfortunate incident, we'll actually shoot, a LiDAR across to see what the distance is at that point in time at that particular time of that relative event. Because again, as we have clearly discussed, lake levels rise and fall. So that would be an influencing factor of what the distance may be at that particular time. And again, when we talk about a circumstance or an unfortunate event that we have to come to investigate, we look at the total circumstance of what happened on that day, the number of vessels that may be out there, the weather conditions, the state of the sun, glare off the water. There could be innumerable factors that could have influenced activity and behavior at that time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My name is Laura Diamond. I'm at 76 North Shore Drive, and thank you for being here, and thank you for the commissioners for serving. I appreciate your volunteer hours and your efforts. I'm also a certified lifeguard, so I know a few things about water safety, and I'm an avid swimmer. I swim up and down the shoreline of Lake Boon in Basin 2, which is where we live. So what I'm confused about is, how do you define a swimming area on Lake Boon? And I've had several near misses where I've picked up my head and there's been a motorboat right near my head. And frankly, I'm really surprised that there haven't been any more accidents on Lake Boon. I've lived here since 1999, and I think there is a lot of unsafe behavior on Lake Boon by water skiers, motorboaters, and jet skis. So I would like to know how you define a swimming area on a lake like this. That's one question. And then in terms of your measurement, is that from shore or is that from dock to dock? When you're measuring that 150 feet, does it go from the shore or does it go from a 20-foot dock? And I have a couple more questions, but if you could address those.
Try the first two.
Let me put these on so I can hear you.
Your distance from shore is measured from the shoreline. What constitutes a swimming area is generally it's activity-based, unless there is a defined swim area established by a municipality. So if there's a particular town beach and it's buoyed off as a swim area, and that is semi-permanent, meaning that it's there for a season, it's clearly recognized as a swim area, we would utilize that as define that as that swim area. But generally it's activity-based, whether there's persons likely to be in the water, and obviously if there's a swimmer in the water, that defines that activity as well.
So if I'm swimming about 20 feet offshore, then there should
Vessels need to be a safe distance away from you, obviously.
Which is defined by 150 feet now. If
Generally,
they're going more than 6 miles an hour.
It's relative to the speed of the vessel and the distance they're away from you, correct.
So it's not clearly defined. There's kind of, it sounds like it's a moving target here. Well, that it's somewhat based on judgment.
Correct.
So I could well pick up my head in the future.
Again, as I explained earlier, we clearly want boaters to be aware that they need to look beyond just their own activity, be aware of other activities that are on that lake, whether it's swimmers, canoers, kayakers, pedal boats, stand-up paddleboarders. There's a whole host of activities that may be on a body of water on a beautiful sunny afternoon, or for that matter, in the evening or even at dark, that they need to be keenly aware of. If you're operating a boat, it's like operating a motor vehicle with a whole lot less indicators of what may be out there. Motor vehicles have the luxury, in most instances, of well-lit areas, well-defined roadways, and travel lane markers. Boats do not have any of those luxuries. It's clearly incumbent upon the operator of that vessel to be clearly aware of their surroundings at all times and operate accordingly.
But the guideline is 150 feet from a swimmer or from the shore, not from a dock.
Correct.
Okay. What about...
But there are instances, again, depending upon how that dock is set up, because as the law states, that vessel needs to be 150 feet, operating at a safe distance, at a reasonable speed, not more than 6 miles per hour, from such things as rafts, floats, moored vessels, which are generally found within that 150 feet of shoreline.
Okay, what about, can I finish?
If you're swimming from shoreline, much like if you're a pedestrian on the roadway, you should take all cautions to make yourself as visible as possible.
Mm-hmm. What about, what about motorboats taking off from shore with a skier behind them, or coming out of a corner cove with a skier behind them?
Again, it's very hard for me to stand here and draw clear lines of parallel answers, given the totality of the circumstances that may be out there at any particular given time and circumstance. There's always going to be variables in a situation. I think it's incumbent upon people who live on a lake, that recreate on that particular lake at any given time, to take a reasonable person approach and do what is best within their ability to make themselves aware of the activities of everybody else out there. Our job in law enforcement, quite honestly, is conflict resolution. Unfortunately, we're going to be called in to resolve the conflict in these circumstances. And again, we look at the circumstances at that particular point in time, and we look at the tools at our discretion, which is generally the law and the regulations, and we see how they apply to that situation at that particular time.
So you're going to wait for an incident to occur?
No, I'm not going to wait for an incident. That's why we're here this evening, to hope to provide some clarity.
Well, I was hoping to have a clearer definition of the distance where it narrows, and also a clearer definition of what activities are allowed and not allowed, because clearly in the past, people's judgments and, taking each where the swimmer is and taking everything into consideration have resulted in some incidents. And so I was hoping to hear a more clear definition of the distance in that particular area that we're talking about, because there's some discrepancy in what people are measuring, and also what's allowed and what's not allowed in terms of boaters taking off from shore, and what that 150 feet is, and also hear a plan from the Stow police and from you guys about how that's going to be patrolled and regulated, whatever those definitions are.
Well, we generally don't disclose our patrol activities. We're a statewide agency. The regional lieutenant that's here, his region consists of probably 40, 50 cities and towns in the Commonwealth? 49, thank you, sir. And Stow is one of those communities that we regulate, or if you will, we patrol. We're going to put that back on a priority list at this point in time, and we'll be out here, but we don't disclose when and where we're going to be out here. And again, as far as the activity that's allowed out there, swimming's clearly an allowed activity, water skiing's allowed activity. I mean, there's probably more that are, I don't think that there's any activity that is not. And I'll defer back to the Lake Boon Commission as far as if there's any activities that they disallow.
Just what's in the bylaws. So, yeah, Laura, could you let someone else have some time now, please?
Did I what? I'm sorry, Conray, I didn't hear you.
Laura, could you please let someone else have some mic time now? You can get in line at the end if you want more questions.
Okay, I have one other question, and that's dawn and dusk. So I think the regulation says that you can go at full speed after sunset for 30 minutes after sunset. Is that true?
That's a regulation.
I think it's a state law.
I don't know the answer.
The state regulation is from sunrise to sunset. Lake Boon bylaws said half hour before sunrise to a half hour after sunset.
So a half hour after
again,
sunset.
Now we're in conflict with the regulation versus the state law. The state law would, if you will, be the law of the land. And so if we're talking about water skiing and similar activities, those would begin at sunrise and end at sunset.
Okay, so after the sun sets, even though it's kind of dark before
that is actually the reason why the law states sunset.
Sunset. Okay, so that'll be what's enforced.
Because it has something to do with the way that the sun hits the land. Water basins tend, oddly enough, to be lower than the level of land, and so light actually tends to disseminate quicker lower on land, so you can't discern from such things on the water as persons in the water.
And so there's nothing more than 6 miles an hour after sunset?
That's not
No,
state law.
That's not a state
Oh,
law.
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing then. What's
That's
the
not a state law.
There isn't a state law.
There is not a state law for speed per se,
Okay.
other than reasonable and prudent for the existing conditions after sunset.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Cindy Cummings on Lake Boon in Stow. I have just some clarifications. People are concerned about the 300-foot essential distance between in the narrow part, and we keep saying shoreline, but it's only when there's someone swimming there. Is that correct? That the 150
Crafts, floats, other vessels that may be there. And again, we talk about the safe distance and the reasonable speed that your vessel needs to be operated with consideration to the wake that it generates and the people that you may be pulling. So they need to be a safe, if you're towing that skier and that skier 75 feet behind you, they need to also be that safe distance away from shoreline.
So is there a recommendation for a safe distance if there's no swimmer?
I would go with 150 feet. Because it generally takes about 150 feet for your wake to disseminate to the shoreline so it doesn't cause excessive rocking or damage to the shoreline.
Okay, I have a question about the rules that we have presently under the Lake Boon.
I get to defer those to.
Okay. So, Lake Boon Commission has rules that are through the bylaws of the both towns, Stow and Hudson. And I understand now that they do not have any authority over boating rules, regulations they cannot enforce. It's up to the police. So any rule that pertains to boating is now void?
No. The rules are still in place. It was, if you have a problem, you call the Stow Police, and if the patrol officer is not out there, then we will send an officer down and enforce either the bylaw or the state law.
So basically, the only change we're seeing is that 150 feet from a swimmer is what is being enforced. What do you mean, no? I'm just listing them. 150 feet from a swimmer, if you're going at other than headway speed.
There's been no change. This is the state law that's been in effect since '89.
I'm saying that we need to be aware of.
Okay.
Because it's a different set of.
Okay.
I mean, we have had a 75-foot clearance from shore and swimmers and boaters and all that. So we're just clarifying that it's 75. It's now 150 feet from the swimmers. So if people are swimming along the shore, just keep 150 feet from them. They should be safe. And it's helpful.
As was described
right,
by
exactly.
Captain Walker.
Okay, so the quiet hours are still in force?
Yes.
Okay.
The bylaws haven't changed.
Okay. Should be clear.
Okay.
Thank you.
No comments from the audience. Just get in line and please use the microphone.
Hi, Chris Craven on Basin 1. And this is, I think, more a question for our Lake Boon Commission is, since there's a lot of concern around the safety for swimmers and folks that are not, power boating, and the power boaters themselves, but is it when we have people who are swimming consistently in an area around us, is it permissible to put out buoys a reasonable distance from shore to kind of delineate that as a swimming area? We do have folks who are out swimming almost every day in certain sections.
Not without permit.
So we would come and ask for a permit to put buoys out for that?
Lake Boon Commission is also harbor master on the lake in reference to buoys, rafts, etc.
Yep.
So you would have to come to us and then make a good case to why that would be a good idea.
Yeah,
Beyond 20
saying
feet.
a reasonable.
No, to put any buoy out, you need a permit.
Yeah.
Beyond 20 feet is your docks. But we have Section 10A under Chapter 90B as Harbor Master Authority, which means we regulate buoys on the lake.
Okay, so we would come in and request
Yes.
it from, okay, thank you.
Dennis Murphy from Barton Road. So I don't have a question as much as I do have a comment. I am a swimmer, and I put over 100 miles in the lake last year, so I'm out there every single day. I've never had an issue with a boat. I always try to be respectful of boats. I do swim with a buoy. I don't go out at rush hour. If I see somebody coming, I'm at Pine Bluffs going across to Pine Point, and I see somebody towing somebody, I wait. I do what makes sense, that's all. And I think that if we all do that, I don't think it's going to be that much of an issue.
I'm Peter Christmas from Barton Road. This is going to be my 11th summer there. I've had what people would consider a speedboat. I now have the proud owner of a very slow 24-foot pontoon boat. I always putt around the lake. I almost never put the gas on. And I can't tell you how many times I've come up on swimmers because they're swimming with a dark cap on, no buoy, and most of the time I end up seeing them because my canine early warning system is barking at them because they look like a wave in the water. We have to have some common sense here. We're never going to shut the lake down from water skiing. You're not going to be able to patrol it 24/7. Water skiers are going closer than 150 feet to that shoreline, and they're going to do it whenever they can because you can't possibly be there all the time. We have to police ourselves like we always have in that community. There's been very few incidents that I know of, any incidents in the last 10, 11 years that we've been there. And we all got to play well together here in the sandbox, kids. That's what it all boils down to.
Hi, my name is David Mitro, and I'm a resident of North Shore Drive. This is our third different house on the lake. This is our 14th summer. I'm both a boater and a swimmer, and I would just echo the comments from the last two folks that, I know in law enforcement you have considerable discretion in terms of making your patrolling decisions, in enforcing the rules and laws that govern us. Easy example is just motor vehicles on the street. Certainly, you don't have the resources or the time to pull over motor vehicles who are, going 1 mile an hour, 5 miles an hour over the speed limit. But that same person who is weaving back and forth, coming dangerously close to pedestrians or bicyclists, you certainly, should and do exercise your discretion to police unsafe activity. And I would suggest that the same rules can apply for the lake. I don't think we need to get involved with technical distances that are simply impractical to enforce on the lake on a regular basis. I mean, we're not going to put buoys all around the lake, that have to move depending on, where there's a dock, where there's a swimmer for 150 feet. But you can accomplish exactly the same thing to keep everybody safe by simply making sure that people are observing good, safe boating rules, whether it's 150 feet, whether it's 75 feet, whether it's 300 feet. If somebody's acting unsafely, you've got the tools at your discretion to enforce those rules and keep everybody safe. And the same applies for all of us who are out there driving. I mean, we just utilize some common sense and stay away from technical definitions that don't provide any level of discretion to you or flexibility to us. Every time in law enforcement where you see some rigid technical rule applied, there's always exceptions and problems that rise from trying to enforce that. So I would just encourage you to follow that rule.
Barry Price from 166 North Shore Drive, which is actually Rice Point, the point we're talking about. Apologize for yelling at it earlier. The question I have is about quiet time, and full disclosure, I'm a huge fan of quiet time, but it seems to be a conflict with state laws. And we seem to be cherry picking which ones we're going to say, yeah, this is when we're going to state, this is when we're going to do local. Just looking for some clarification. And again, I'm a water skier, wakeboarder.
I'll admit, it's been a while since I've looked at what quiet time consists of here in Stow, but could you share that with me?
It's 2 to 6 on Sunday afternoons.
I'll clarify that. Yeah. Quiet time is a town bylaw. It's called out for Sundays and holidays, 2 to 6 p.m., basically headway speed only on the whole lake.
Okay.
So you're saying, like, okay, there's one bylaw that's a conflict, and then there's another one that's not. Which one do we choose to enforce, and which one don't we? So I know that part of this whole process is that the Lake Boon Commission is going to look at all the rules and regulations that are out there now and see if there is any conflict. However, they are still in place as of right now. Okay. All the bylaws are in place. So it goes back to what that other gentleman was saying. It gives us the option of, on the 150, how we enforce what we enforce. But that bylaw is still in effect, that quiet hours one.
And I appreciate that. And I understand that this is a huge challenge trying to make everybody happy, but usually that's the problem, is trying to make everybody happy is impossible. So I appreciate the work you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Richard Cummings again, Davis Road. So I am in agreement with a lot of the folks just before me who were talking about using common sense with swimmers and boaters, and swimmers should make themselves visible. But it's nice to say we should all play together, but if for whatever reason, for example, a snorkeler or somebody who's really hard to see pops up in front of a boat, how would you be enforcing something like that? If I'm a boater, I look religiously all the time to see, even way ahead to see if I can see a swimmer, but sometimes if somebody's underwater or all they have is a little snorkel sticking up, it's impossible. And if they pop up in front of me, how would that be enforced?
Again, unfortunately, if there's an incident, there's an accident, there's a personal injury, and we're called out to investigate that accident, we go by the letter of the law.
Well, but if I had, I mean, does the swimmer bear some responsibility for making themselves visible in some way?
We can only go by the letter of the law that we're asked to enforce. That would obviously be a plausible defense, and we would take that matter to court and see how that would resolve itself. But if we're called to respond to that accident and there's a swimmer that's been struck by a motorboat, we would look at the law relative to safe distance.
If they weren't struck, but just the 150 feet were we were closer than we should have been if we had been able to see them, but nobody was hurt or anything like that. How would that be an enforcement, or?
Again, we could what if this to death, but again, what our tool is when we're called into those situations or we make those observations, we go by what we see based on the observations at that time, and the officer has a host of discretion at how they can respond to that. They can go all the way from arrest. The motorboat laws in Massachusetts are criminal by nature. The officer can also go to a civil citation process, issue a $100 ticket for unsafe operation.
I mean, if I'm
there
doing...
could be anything from the far extreme of an arrestable offense to a verbal warning to resolve that situation.
If I'm doing my darn best, level best to spot swimmers, but they're just not visible until I'm right upon them, do they not bear some responsibility in that? What am I to expect as a boater?
Again, I hope I have made this abundantly clear, and I will restate this. As a boat operator, much like a motor vehicle operator, you are required to be in control of your vessel at all times, given the totality of the circumstances that you're operating in. And the situation that you so described are one of those situations where it's a very unpredictable environment. Operating a motor vehicle is a very unpredictable environment. But we add now to that situation less of the tools that we have on a roadway to the waterway, and I wish I could give you a clear answer. But what I can tell you that our waterways on a beautiful summer afternoon are going to be as densely populated as probably our roadways, as the gentleman well put it, during, what did he refer to it? Rush hour. And I think that's a great anachronism to kind of utilize in your mindset when you're out there on those beautiful summer afternoons. You're on your vessel, you're operating your vessel at that point in time during rush hour on the water.
Most likely vessel operator.
Hi, Lieutenant Wolski, Environmental Police. I'm the lieutenant that's in charge of enforcement in the region. To answer your question, which we can't answer unless something actually happens, like the captain said, the law is pretty clear. It says failure to maintain a proper lookout. That's what'll get all of you if you strike somebody with your boat. And you can argue, well, the swimmer should have had responsibility. She or he was wearing a blue swimming cap and dark clothes, and I struck them, but I couldn't see them. Well, it's probably going to go to court, and it's going to be litigated, and there's either going to be some responsibility borne towards the swimmer, or they're going to say, you failed to maintain a proper lookout, you struck the swimmer. That's what courts are for. We're not going to decide that.
I understand if somebody's struck.
So we can't give you a what-if answer that you're looking for. The answer is, we don't know each case until we take it to court and look at every bit of evidence and who saw what and how fast were you going, what time of day was it, the condition of the wind, the waves, the water, was salt in your eyes, and you know what I mean? Was the person drinking? There's 150 different equations here. So you're just saying, I couldn't see the snorkeler, and you know, we don't even want to get into that. Okay.
I just want to, like you were saying, there's a whole list of things that could happen, would happen. Someone calls, people call the Stow police all the time. That's what we're there for. We respond to calls. If you're operating a boat and you came close to somebody you didn't see and they called us, we would respond. We would talk to you as the boat operator, and we would talk to the swimmer. We'd come up with a decision on an appropriate action. I can't tell you every single time this is what every single officer is going to do, because like they were saying, every situation is different. So we don't know what is going to happen. I can tell you that from the Stow Police perspective, we would give you the opportunity to tell your side. And we've always done that in the past.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, so if somebody's, you know, people have mentioned that we use prudence, that you're not always there to enforce, and people sometimes go within 150 feet of a shore. But if there's no swimmer, it's safe and prudent, whatever. If somebody calls in to you folks to say, hey, somebody's closer than 150 feet to our shore, even though there's nobody around, do you need to see that?
Good question.
To make it thing, or can anybody just call and claim anything they want? And you
well, it's like they could see Bigfoot too, but unless they've got a video, I don't believe it. So the thing is when, you know, we have 50 cities and towns, 49, 50 cities and towns, from Winchendon to Lowell, Draycott to Marlboro, Hudson, over to Ocam, Rutland, and all the cities and towns in between. We've got a half a dozen officers, including myself, not just doing boating. We're not going to be on this lake every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. They're going to have the municipal police working on it. From time to time, we'll be here. We'll be up in the Lowell, Draycott area, over in Winchendon. We'll be over down to, you know, Worcester, doing it all with just what we have. But it's like anything else. Just because you're in a trooper parked on Route 2, that doesn't mean you can go 95 or 105, all right? You're still expected to abide by the laws. Like I tell everybody, you know, I hear everybody in here, and I'm glad you're all here. I understand this goes back to 1941. There was probably a few people living on this lake. More people have come and lived on the lake. They're buying more houses. You have bigger, faster boats. You have PWCs. You have pontoon boats. There's enough room for everybody. I heard one gentleman talking about, you're going to shut down these other lakes. All those lakes you talked about, we patrol on the environment. We're not trying to shut down anybody. We're not trying to shut down water skiing. But what happens is you have areas like this one here where it has some questionable limits or sizes for boats to go through. You might not be exactly 150 feet. You might be 142 feet. You're doing your best to stay in the center. You go to Wyman's Pond in Westminster, very similar. Somebody mentioned over in Lunenburg, Lake Shirley. Every one of these places have the same laws as Mass General Law. All right? They might have a few bylaws. I'm not sure. We don't enforce bylaws. But if everybody, like this last speaker said, everybody works together in the sandbox, they try to watch out for each other, you can be right, you can be dead right. I mean, when people are water skiing, it's a hot day, and they're trying to do the right thing, I don't think it'd be a great time to go swimming right across the middle of the lake, you know, but some people can do it, and so you still got to watch out for them, all right? So when we come out here and do the enforcement, we're going to be fair, and they're going to be fair, and we're not going to stand there with a ruler going, I tell my guys, I got 33 years experience working in Boston, Gloucester for 10 years, the Cape, and everywhere in between out to Greenfield and the Berkshires. I've seen a lot of boating accidents. I've seen a lot of people having a good, safe summer. But what happens is It's all fun and games until somebody gets poked in the eye with a sharp stick. No one is going to say, well, it's okay for you to be 20 feet from shore doing 40 miles an hour, and that wake knocked that little girl off the dock and she fractured her skull, or there's a prop strike, or I'm pulling my water skier and I'm closer than 75 feet and he slammed into that dock. But the old Lake Boon Association from 1941 says I can be doing 40 miles an hour at 76 feet. It's not going to fly when you got an attorney coming after you saying you are not within, you're well within that 150 feet, you caused an accident, somebody got hurt, you're going to be liable. You're going to be liable. So you need to be taking all prudent restrictions and trying to be safe. And like the Captain Walker said, you got to take everything in totality of circumstance. I understand you can't make your lake any bigger. You know, you can't stretch it out even if you have this rule. But if you're trying your best to stay in the center, I'm not going to have my officers and myself with a LADAR going, oh, I got him. He's 9 feet off of where he should be. But that being said, you get somebody on a jet ski or a water skier and they come flying by 20, 30 feet from this shoreline and somebody's got little swimmers. You said, what's a swimming area? I got people swimming right here in front of my house. That's a swimming area. That's a swimming area. All right? Unbroken woods over here and there's nobody there and you're coming around and you're a little closer than you're supposed to be and you're making your loop, I wouldn't really be worried about that. I'd definitely be worried about it if you're going down through the Narrows and there's a bunch of people in canoes and kayaks and they're trying to have a nice day and you come 10 yards from them doing 30 miles an hour and cause an excessive wake and knocking people over. Now that's a legitimate gripe. So I think you know what I'm talking about. Reasonable, prudent, working together. But I've been sitting on lakes. Last year we were doing Fort Meadow Reservoir. I'm sitting over there. I'm writing a citation to somebody doing like 45 miles an hour from me to you from a dock. People are getting all rocked and knocked over. As I'm sitting there writing the citation with another officer, somebody comes pulling two kids with no observer doing about 40 miles an hour about 10 feet from my police boat. So you know that wasn't reasonable and prudent and proper, and they got written up. So I think we can work together. I think the local police and us are going to work together very well. I think if you read these little books, 99% of your issues are going to be gone away. Make sure you're registered. Make sure you have an observer. Don't water ski after dark, after sunset. All right? Do the basic things to keep your neighbors happy, and we can all just get along.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
that's my take.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I just wanted to make a closing comment that I think the Lake Boone Commission has done a fabulous job for a number of decades keeping the lake usable and safe all the way around, and I appreciate all that.
I agree with that. And the thing is, the other thing I'll agree with, in 1941, I don't know how many camps were there, or houses. There were probably seasonal camps. A lot of people had 10-horse motors. They did a little fishing. You know, they came on the weekend or something like that. As the years went by, a lot of these became year-round homes, not just, you know, weekend retreats. Now people are living out there. They don't really want motorboats flying right by their docks. You can't blame them, all right? But there's times people want to go out in their motorboats. That's why they live on a lake. You know, they want to have a good time, and they want to go water skiing. So we're not trying to shut water skiing down. I'm going to work with you. I'm going to tell my officers we have to work, but I can't have people saying, hey, it says I can be 75 feet, so I don't really care about anybody else. I'm just going to blast wherever I want, when I want. That's going to be bad for you, bad for me, bad for everybody. So we need to work together on this with the local police and the Lake Boone Commission and make it as safe as possible summer, because part of our job is investigating all the fatal and serious boat accidents with prop strikes and stuff. I don't like it. I don't like doing it. I've been doing it 33 years. Captain Walker has been doing this a long time. We see the worst things that possibly happen, and nothing is better than a safe summer.
Steve Servant, Sudbury Road. Thanks for all your time tonight. I just have 3 quick questions. First off, am I correct in understanding that I can take off from and return to my dock water skiing?
Well, you're not supposed to go, more than headway speed from within 150 feet of the shoreline. So I tell people to try to go out and then go from there. Because if you take off and there's a big wake and it causes a problem for your neighbor, they may have a real pain in the neck. But if you own 400 feet of shoreline and there's nobody there, I'm not going to have an issue with it. But if somebody lives right next door to you, you know? Yeah. No one else right there? You're the only person there?
No. No.
There you go. Well, I can't give you permission to like take off like a banshee out of the corner. But again, like if somebody's like continuously, like they got you on the phone, like he almost ran me over, you might have a violation. But a lot of people do that. I know they take off. But again, it's all fun and games till somebody gets poked in the eye with a sharp stick. I'm just telling you what the law is.
So you're saying the law is no, that I can't
You're not
take off from
supposed
my
to
dock.
go within 150 feet of a shoreline or a swimming area. Now, if there's a house right there and they're swimming, you can't take off and create a big wake.
Okay. The second question is the trampoline sandbar. Are you supposed to be 150 feet off of that now too?
I don't even know what the trampoline sandbar is.
Oh, is that considered like a solid thing now?
Well, I'd have to see it. You know what I mean?
Not a problem.
When we get out on the water and the local police get out on the water, and we'll be seeing you people out there, we'll be meeting you out there, and we'll get some local knowledge. I've only been out here like once.
Okay.
All right. Last year we had a tremendous amount of patrols on the Merrimack River and the Lake Muscatatuck due to the swans and swan attacks on jet skiers. And so we had 21 patrols there, and it was like nonstop. And I never had an opportunity to come down here, but now we have a district officer, Ken Gormley, and good guy. He's going to be patrolling out here with the sergeant and some other people, and we're going to try to get everybody on board so you're all on the same page.
My third final question has to do with the distance from various stuff. On a nice Saturday afternoon, you might see in the first basin 3 or 4, possibly as many as 5 boats in the cycle towing various whatever, skiers, kids on towables, and a bunch of people rafting off in the middle. So in essence, if we have to be 150 feet off the folks in the middle on both sides, and then 150 feet off the shore.
You got no place to go.
And you're following someone who drops a wakeboarder or a skier. Does everything come to a screeching halt until we all start back again? Because there's not going to be a lot of space there.
You know, I've been out on Lake Menominee. I've been on just about every body of water in the Commonwealth, and things are congested. They're crazy, and it's pretty hard to regulate exactly right down to the nth degree. You're trying to get out there and water ski, and people are rafted up, and they try to stay away best they can. So, you know, maybe the guys come by at 100 feet, and they're not exactly 150 feet, but it's a judgment call, and you're trying to do the very best you can, all right? But try not to be dangerous. That's what I'm telling you.
Hi. My name is Karen Axler. I'm from Newton, Massachusetts, and I probably represent a few people here that are from off lake. I've been water skiing on this lake for 20 years and really have enjoyed it. So I come from a little bit of a different perspective.
Yep.
But I do have one question. So this is some information that has been explained to me, so maybe you can help clarify it for me. Basically, I've been told that state law says that the patrol must be done by state police marine unit. Okay, and then so who is in charge of this unit, and how many certified marine patrol officers does
We're not
town
the state
staff?
police. The state police marine unit are not us. The Massachusetts Environmental Police are a separate entity from the Mass State Police. We have the same jurisdiction, same police authority as state troopers on all laws of the Commonwealth, but our agency is the Commonwealth's boating law authority. The Massachusetts Environmental Police designate one person who represents the National Association of Boating Law Administrators. Captain Walker is the boating law administrator for Massachusetts. All right, so the State Police Marine Unit is primarily saltwater marine unit. They do have a dive team they use to mostly recovery. They don't do very much recreational boating. That's the Environmental Police. And they are based in Boston, the State Police Marine Unit.
So the Marine unit has nothing to do with this, then, basically?
You'll never see the
Okay,
State
so-
Police Marine Unit here, ever.
Ever, okay. So then how many Stow police officers are there that will be patrolling this lake?
So like I said, we're going to have one Lake Boon patrol officer who is going to be assigned. We don't know the hours yet, but we're hoping to schedule at least 8 hours a week. That is separate from the other 10 full-time officers who are all going to be taking the basic boater safety class and who have the authority to go out on the lake and who will be patrolling. So if there is not availability between the Lake Boon patrol officer, then whoever's on duty will be trained to take out the Stow police boat to enforce the laws. We all have that authority under 90B and on 4198 where we derive our authority from.
Okay. Well, I look forward to a good summer. Thank you.
Dave Gray, Pine Point Road. I again want to thank everybody here for participating, and I just have two more quick questions.
Then
One
you shut
is-
off. That's it. You've had like 3. I'm kidding.
Okay. Is there a distance from canoes and kayaks that is supposed to be kept?
Well, anything that your wake does, you're responsible for your wake. A wake is part of your vessel. So if you're out going around, you have to give them wide berth, because say you're sitting out there in a canoe and you're fishing, or you're in a kayak and somebody comes, they're pulling a water skier and it causes a big wake and it knocks them over. You're actually responsible for that, because that wake is a part of your vessel. So you have to use good common sense, all right? And yes, at the end of the day, if somebody gets injured and they go, hey, that guy right there with the green shirt says Lake Boon on it, and he's drinking Boone's Farm, and he was in this accident, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
So use common sense.
Okay. One other question. I understand that all of this is largely subject to judgment, what's prudent and what is reasonable. But the dimensions of the lake are pretty well fixed.
Right.
And it sounds like Theresa had made it a pretty accurate measurement of 318 feet across a space from shoreline to shoreline. Is that right?
Sounds like you can go through the center, okay, as best
But
you can.
if there's a dock on either side that's 20 feet long,
Well, the thing is, if
sound like it.
Yeah, I know. It's nothing. Anybody ever been to Wyman's Pond in Westminster? It's 10 times worse than this lake. And we patrol that lake, and people water ski on it.
Go there.
When I say worse, I mean it has all these little fingers, and they're thin. It opens up into a couple of big areas. And there's a few places you can go right down the center. And then they actually have a bridge, and you have to slow down the headway speed to go underneath the bridge. And occasionally people don't, and they hit the bridge and they go airborne and land in the trees. But for the most part, people are very compliant on the lake. You get the violations unregistered, and they don't have any life preservers on. The big thing for us, and I tell my officers who are working under me, look, if you don't have life preservers on, that's a ticket. I mean, for children. You don't have anything in your boat. I don't want to hear that they're back at the camp. That's not helping you out. If you're in a collision, especially children, they're not wearing them. You got a 2-year-old registration on your boat. I mean, come on. You don't have your safety equipment in your boat. You don't have your basic stuff that's in this book. That's why I brought all these books for everybody. Make sure you get one. If you're up to snuff on everything in this book and you're trying your best to be compliant, not to the nth degree, because you're not going to be able to do everything within perfection, all right? But if you're trying hard and you're not getting, and no one's getting hurt, and you're not out drinking to excess, I don't think you're going to have a bad summer.
Okay, thank you. I also want to mention that I'm a swimmer too, and I carry my safety gear with me all the time. I'm visible.
Yes.
Hi,
Yes.
second time, Bob Streeter, Hudson. I don't live on the lake, but I see 2 flaws in the law.
Yep.
One of them is I've observed water skiers pulling skiers off of docks. I believe you, sir, mentioned that the big concern of being over 100 feet away is to mitigate the wake. Well, when water skiing boats pull skiers off docks, they're usually perpendicular, perhaps always perpendicular to the shore, headed towards the water skiing area. And they goose it. And there's no wake coming off the rear of a boat. The wake only comes off of the side of a boat. You're already 75 feet, I think it's probably the tow rope length, plus
Well, the
20.
skiers not, they're right at the dock. You're pulling them from the dock.
All right, well, I was thinking.
And so you're not supposed to ski within 150 feet of the shoreline.
Well, there's a problem because I can't see where the danger of a wake, pulling a skier of a dock, I can't see where that would be a problem. The second problem I see is we have all these rules for boats. And Marri made a lot of analogies to driving cars. Well, I know myself, I walk on sidewalks. I do not go out on the highway. I cross in a crosswalk. If I cross where there's no crosswalk, a policeman gives me a jaywalking ticket. Really? I think a law or a rule.
I've never seen a police officer write one, but.
Well, they do it in Boston. I think a nice rule would be to have a sidewalk. Let's just say, okay, the 20-foot dock, a water ski.
So where are you going with this?
Well, making a sidewalk.
All right, we're on the water, so we're not going to be making any sidewalks. If you're talking about the swimmers crossing.
Let's be creative.
All right, get to your point.
Let's have a law then saying swimmers cannot swim more than 30 feet from the shoreline. That way they'll have 10 feet to get around the docks.
Here's what you're going to have to do. If you want to have a law like that, you have to go to your state legislator,
well, I think
ask him to file a bill. We only enforce laws. We don't create the laws.
It's a common sense law. If I was a swimmer, I certainly wouldn't go out where the boats are, like I wouldn't go out in the middle of 495. And I would think 30 feet off, that's deep enough water for any swimmer to have a ball. And if the swimmer goes
I get where you're
beyond that
coming
point,
from, but
give 'em a
we
ticket.
can't talk about making laws. That's not what we're here tonight to do. And as far as the thing coming off if somebody goes out and there's no other traffic there, but I will tell you, I saw a lot of the people going out like that come in like that, and one of the first fatalities I investigated was a professional, world-class water skier on a small lake in Massachusetts who was taken off from his dock, and then the ski would bring him back, and he'd like to come in and just sit on the dock because they were that expert, you know what I mean, as they came back in, and he misjudged the speed, and he went on his back, and he slid into the dock, and he hit his head, and he went into a coma, and they were best of friends, and a few months later, he passed away, and he wasn't even going that fast, so that's why you're not supposed to water ski close to docks, in or out, all right?
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Michel Walsh, Pine Point. I just wanted clarification because people have said different things.
Yeah.
So it's 150 feet from shore.
Whether there's a swimmer or not, yeah.
So, but there was a swimmer that was saying, well, if I'm 30 feet out, then they have to be 150 feet from me, which would be 180 feet, which when you're talking about some of these areas would be tough. Plus they're moving, so when they're going across the lake, which I'm in Basin 1, and I'm there during the week, and there's not very many people out, but I have kids, and they happen to be 17, so they can spot. I'm terrified. I am honestly terrified because some of these swimmers are going straight across, no buoy.
Right.
And now, the way that they were saying it, and I don't want the swimmers to be confused or the boaters, if the swimmer is 40 feet out or 50 feet out, am I supposed to now be 150 feet from them, even though I'm already 150 feet from shore? They just happen to be 50 feet out.
Good question. What happens if you have swimmers like all over the lake, like some on the other side? And then what if there's a swimmer 50 feet on the other side of your boat? So what do? Just stop moving?
Right.
And, there's what-if questions. I'm just telling you, you can what-if everybody to death. There's always going to be the 100-year-old guy with the blue bathing cap who has a snorkel, and he only comes up for air every 3 minutes, but he's 2 inches underwater, and you hit him. Am I going to be charged for hitting him? I mean, we could do this all day and night. Let's stick to the big basic stuff, guys. There's always going to be accidents. It happens on snowmobiles, boats, ATVs, dirt bikes, cars, airplanes, submarines. But let's try to keep it real. I'm not going to give you an answer because I'm not sure.
I don't want to hit anyone. I mean, that's
Right.
common sense. I just don't.
Right. If
but
you're unsure,
it seems
take a look,
like they're
slow down and
unsure, too.
look. Maintain a proper lookout. And then once you're sure there's no swimmers around you, you can give it some throttle and go.
And to answer the question about the water trampoline, because that is ours, Again, it's within 150 feet. So honestly, if you're out, my husband was the one that got up and said he measured it with some gadget. If you're out from there, a normal amount, like another 75 feet, there's nothing to worry about, and you're still 150
So
feet off the
this thing floats in the water?
It does. And if it didn't, weekly there'd be someone hitting the
I think the
sand.
captain's right. We should set up our patrol from the trampoline, sitting next to the trampoline.
Come on over. I
And,
welcome you.
You know, we can monitor everything from there. I tell everybody, I'm not so sure about your Lake Commission's rules and regulations, anything over docks 20 feet. I know there's been court litigation. You put a dock out there 20, 50, 75, or 100 feet, or a big long, and there's no lighting on it, there's no permitting. Somebody runs into that dock, there's liability on you. If they because you don't own all that water out there, and all of a sudden you have this dock floating around, and it's not reasonable and prudent, somebody's out at night, motorboating along, and all of a sudden they run into this unlit dock. We're starting to see court cases like this because people are adding more and more, and they want their dock to go across the lake, you know, just to stop all activity except theirs.
Yes, sir. Don Hawks again. I've been around the lake one way or another since 1949. I hate to admit it. My father was a Lake Boon commissioner, and I was in his footsteps. I bear probably a singular distinction here tonight. When I was about 13 years old, I was in a pram with a motor on it pulled up out of the water, and I had a homemade sail rigged, square rigger, so I could only go with the wind. And I was going down the second basin, and there was a young man at that time, he was probably 20, came out from the shore, and it was back in those days, you could steer with a wheel and adjust the carburetor on the boat at the same time. They were small boats, but probably a 25, 30 horsepower motor. I saw him coming at me. I was dead in the water. I'm a sailboat. He's turning around, looking like this, and the boat is not planing because it isn't adjusted right. He went diagonally across my boat, split it wide open.
Sure.
I had a passenger in the boat. The prop went between me and the passenger, split my boat wide open. If it had gone this much further either way, either my passenger or I wouldn't be alive today. So I fully appreciate what you're trying to do. And thank God we haven't had an episode like that since. I'd like to just come back. We've heard stories of other lakes where they have either special legislation or waivers or something like that. Is there any circumstance by which, after full investigation, there might be some way to vary the 150 if we get special legislation?
Sir, I hear your question. I doubt it. Mass General Law 90B, with the distance, it was set up uniformly across all waters of the Commonwealth for one reason, so that every person would have a uniform law and a safety measure that's measured that the courts would understand, the lawyers would understand, the boating public would understand, homeowners would understand, and when they start jumping around different, our law, it's only going to be 75 feet here. You know, like I said, that's when the litigation is going to start. You can file anything you want, but I doubt you're going to get it passed. It can be, from what I understand, it can be more restrictive, it just can't be more loose.
That goes to my understanding more than a few years of the Lake Boon rules versus the motorboat. It's an anomaly. In our town of Stow bylaws and Hudson bylaws, there is the entire 3-page set of Lake Boon rules. One of them says you can't bathe in the waters of Lake Boon unless you're properly attired. I don't think you're checking on that.
No.
It says you can't rake leaves into the lake. That's part of our bylaws. The quiet hours is more restrictive rather than less, and I think that comes to what you just said, that if somebody said we shouldn't have quiet hours because it's inconsistent with the hours of operation of the general laws, this is more restrictive, so that would be allowed. Is that correct?
What it is just this. The rule is 150 feet minimum. 150-foot rule is the minimum state law, period. You know, if the town wants to make it stricter, they could.
But I'm referring now to the quiet hours.
We can't make it any looser.
But the quiet hours,
That's bylaw.
that's a bylaw, and you see no conflict with that.
You have to talk to your town attorneys and your
Okay, thank
town
you.
lawyers.
Carolyn McDonald, 76 North Shore Drive. This question is for the commission. To get a buoy put in, what are the guidelines that we have to follow in order to get that done? What are the guidelines for getting a buoy?
We don't currently have any specific guidelines for that. We look at each individual case. You have to come to us, make your application, and we'll see if it's reasonable.
So what you're saying to me, it's based on your personal judgment.
Not my personal judgment, no, the commission's judgment.
Well, it's based on the three of you and your judgment, and we don't have a set of guidelines that make it I mean, this seems very unfair to me, that there should be a set of guidelines, and if it fits the guidelines, it's a buoy. And not based on personal opinion of three people on the commission, because if we change members of the commission, then that can change the next time around.
Just like the legislature, just like the president.
Pardon?
Just like the legislature changes and rules change, the president changes, you get different executive orders. That's life. It's not fair. Currently, we are the sitting commission, and we're empowered to look at buoy requests. And we will look at them in face of the site we see it at. If you want to put a buoy in the middle of the lake, we're not going to do it. We're not going to restrict the lake anywhere. So we do have kind of guidelines.
I'm not asking for placing buoys in absurd places like the middle of the lake. I'm asking for a set of guidelines that stands the time. That is consistent from 1 month to the next month, from 1 year to the next year. And if we can't get the guidelines from you, then I suspect we will have to talk to the town and talk to them about getting specific guidelines for that, because it just seems arbitrary that you're sitting there and making a decision whether or not a buoy will be put in or not.
There currently is no way that a buoy can be put in by right, so that's the guideline. They cannot be put in. The only way you can is to make an application. The only situation we have now is we look at the conditions and make a judgment accordingly. However, we can take it under advisement that that might be something that we wish to look into. However, currently, we have nothing on that all the way back.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Just one comment on the on page 20, they have some markers, and if there was, I'd only make one suggestion. If you ever did put out any no wake area signs or danger areas, use the buoys that coincide, purchase buoys that coincide with these exact pictures, because those are recognized statewide.
We have those in the lake already.
All right, great.
There's 5 current no wake buoys in the lake, and they're all per that page.
Sure, I'm sure, but just in case you didn't have any. Just a few more questions, and we're going to have to wrap it up as far as our presentation. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hank Tyree, Barton Road, a resident of the lake for the past 12 years. I have a general question. I apologize if this has already been covered, but I'm assuming that the responsibility of buying a buoy and placing a buoy is that on the homeowner. Is that correct? And that there's an application process of sorts?
This is really a Lake Boone Commission question, and yes, you would come to us, you'd get it, you ask us for a permit, and typically the homeowners pay for those buoys. There's 2 instances on the lake, or 1 or 2 instances, like where one of the no wake buoys was paid for by a homeowner.
Okay. So. And with that in mind, I know this sounds trivial and pretty down to earth, but measuring out the 150 feet. How is that done? Is that done with rope or hoses or what?
If you're looking for a buoy, come to us, ask for a permit, and we'll talk about it.
Okay, great. And this is a broader question that has more to do with environment in general. I've noticed that over the years, with the increased size of boats and the wake riders, there's a lot of waves, and the beaches are getting punished. Right next to the town beach is a tree that's just fallen in. It's a recent occurrence. If you look carefully around the lake, there's other boughs and branches coming down. There's beaver damage, of course. On my particular point, there's a tree that's bending and it's getting ready to fall into the lake. So the question ends up being, what role does the commission play or the environmental police?
The environmental police, we're like state police, we're enforcement officers. We don't really get involved like in cutting down trees or any of that kind of stuff. That's not really our mission. That would fall on the landowner, the homeowner. If you have an issue, if you end up having type of a beaver problem, that goes to your local conservation commission, and they're the people that have oversight and jurisdiction on that.
Yeah, I'm actually not concerned about beavers, believe me. I'm actually more concerned about trees going into the lake. So whose jurisdiction is that? Is that the commission?
No, it's the homeowner and the Conservation Commission.
So let me understand this. So if people are skiing, and I don't begrudge that, and speedboats are coming through and trees are falling into the lake, it's the homeowner that bears the financial responsibility of that.
Well, I'll say this. It happened up on, there was a lake where a guy cut down trees on purpose because he wanted to improve his beach and make it, and it caused some erosion, and the trees fell in the lake, and a boat could run into him. Then he'd be negligent for causing the problem. Now, if you have a cumulative effect of the wind, waves, water, ice dams, ice and waves caused by vessels on a tree over 20 or 30 or 40 years, good luck trying to find the singular person that caused the tree to finally bend and fall, or you're going to charge everybody on the lake.
Right.
You know, so I'd say if it's a danger that tree's going to fall on somebody, yeah, it'd fall on the homeowner. And you could always build a retaining wall, get permission. You see people doing that.
Okay.
But I mean, we wouldn't get into that type of minutia on one tree. I'm just telling you, it's not going to happen.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Just fair.
Thank you. Can we make this the last one, please?
Yeah, okay.
I have 3 questions, though, but they're
Okay.
quick.
30 questions?
3, just
Oh,
3.
3.
First, I didn't get one of your nifty pamphlets. Where do I?
Oh, you didn't?
They're on the way in.
On the way
Awesome.
in. You can have mine.
All right.
can
Thank
have
you.
mine.
Really?
Yeah.
Does it say in here if it's 150 feet from the shoreline or from a swimmer? Because I've kind of heard
It
both.
says 150 feet, the law says, this is an abstract, it's 150 feet from shoreline, but it also, you're responsible for damage caused from your wake, from any type of a raft, dock, property. People have their property damaged. Nothing gets somebody more upset if their boat's sitting out there and somebody comes flying by 20 feet away and their boat's crashing up against the dock.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? So you're still responsible for the vessel, the dock, not just the shoreline.
I guess what I'm wondering is if I'm pulling a skier and I get 120 feet from the shoreline, what is the penalty for that?
Well, again, say you're staying 150 feet out, and you can't, it's fluid. You don't have somebody from the back of the skier with a thing going out,
Right, but people
checking it constantly. You know, you're trying to stay the reasonable distance out there. But if you're being so blatant that even you would go, oh my God, they came like 6 feet from the shore of that dock, and they get cited. If I write a citation, it's a $100 fine or arrestable, and it can go on the operator, not the skier, the operator of the vessel. Is that you want the citation for the judge, the clerk magistrate, or if it goes to a jury, everybody to go, oh yeah, the operator was ridiculous. I mean, almost killed the person. They're going so close. I wouldn't get all panicked about being 10 or 20 feet on you're trying to do a turnaround or something. You're trying to be reasonable, trying to be prudent. How are we going to measure that? Are we going to have a LiDAR? They were 150 feet. They're 147.2 feet. You know what I mean? It's not going to happen.
Okay. All right. Thank Thank you.
If I may, before we leave, I'll read you the exact statute.
Oh, I'll find it. I just didn't get
No,
it.
no, we're here. Certainly. You're going to find your Mass General laws that pertain to motorboats fall under Mass General Law, Chapter 90B as in boat, and it would be sections 1 through 36, I believe, but obviously there's sections in there that pertain to recreational vehicles as well. But the majority of your motorboat laws fall under Chapter 90B as in boat. The regulatory Code of Massachusetts Regulations, CMR, that pertains to that, to 90B, is under CMR 323, sections 2.0 and sections 4, which pertain to personal watercraft. 2.07 of CMR 323 addresses operations specifically, and it says distances. All motorboats shall be operated in such a manner that in such a distance that prevents their wake, wash, being thrown into or onto, causing excessive rocking on other vessels, rafts, or floats. The general rule is that safe distance is 150 feet, based on the fact that it takes that 150 feet for the average motorboat, giving its design, for that wake or wash to be disseminated so it becomes less obstructive or obtrusive to those things that are along shore, such as the shoreline, trees, and obviously other structures. It goes on to say, water skiers can be held accountable, much like the vessel itself. Skiers in particular, skiers that are on a set of skis versus a tuber, which is less obviously under the control of the operator of the vessel. So we understand the difference between a water skier and a tuber? Yes? Okay. The water skiers shall ski a safe distance to prevent their wash from being thrown into or causing excessive rocking of other vessels, rafts, or floats as well. Then it goes on to say, motorboats shall not be operated within 150 feet of shoreline which is being used as a swimming area, whether public or private. And then it goes on to say within 75 seaward boundary of a public beach. So again, we discussed what constitutes a public beach. Obviously, a set of buoys that are set up by a municipality, maintained by that municipality to delineate a public beach. That's where the 75 feet comes in under the state law, is away from that public beach. And again, this section shall apply to all motorboats, barges, water skiers, or other devices being towed by power, and the operator of the towing vessel shall be responsible for the compliance therewith. Does that provide any clarity or further confusion? That's okay.
So is it 150 feet from the shoreline or 150 feet from a shoreline that's being currently used as a swimming area?
It's 150 feet. So we have the overall, what we call the safe distance standard. We have the prevailing rule, which is the safe distance standards, which is generally conceived to be the 150 feet. So that if my vessel is operating at such a speed and in such a manner that it's causing excessive wake that could cause damage to such things as long as the shoreline, rafts, floats, moored vessels, and the like, then I have to be within, my speed needs to be reasonable and prudent for those existing conditions, which is generally considered to be that headway speed no more than 6 miles per hour. So again, we reduce the speed of the boat, we generally reduce the nature of the wake of the vessel within that distance of shoreline.
When there's a swimmer.
When there's a shoreline, raft, floats, or other vessels. When we add the swimmer to it, now we have to have that other, obviously, standard that we're looking again to reduce the speed of the boat, because reducing the speed of the boat does two things. Hopefully it reduces the wake that the vessel causes, and it increases the operator's ability to safely control time and distance with speed, reducing that to observe those things that may cause hazard along shorelines, such as swimmers. But when we see a swimmer, our speed automatically has to come down by the regulation.
Okay.
So the closer proximity you are to shore, reasonably, this is what the law is asking us to do, is to reduce our speed. Reducing our speed gives us the greater ability to see, react, in that time and distance to those things that may cause hazards along the shoreline to the boat operator. Rafts, floats, excessive rocking to those things caused by the wake, and the proximity to swimmers along that shoreline.
Okay. Is that in here?
It should be, yes.
All right.
Maybe not in its exact verbatim, but yes.
All right. Thank you.
If it's not in there, it's available online. So if you search Mass CMR 323, Section 2.0, you will find everything that she just said available in a PDF format.
If I might just indulge the last question, or comment, really. Nobody has mentioned jet skis, personal watercraft. And this is more of a comment than a question. I've observed over a lot of years, these things have become more sophisticated, and they go 75 miles an hour, I would estimate, some of them. And they do, carrying 2 people. And it appears that a lot of them, I don't own them. I have a few neighbors that do, and I'm not putting anybody down, but unsafe operation of those, they go out and they do donuts, chasing each other around within 20, 30 feet of each other. I've seen it always, and it's an awful tough thing. Having been on the commission, and I recognize how difficult that is, but that is a safety enforcement issue. Number 2, and finally, there's a new generation of boats that are specifically designed to push a giant wake for wakeboarding.
Correct.
They are very different from ski boats, which are flat bottom and usually will create a wake of about 6 inches. These things deliberately cause a wake 3 to 4 feet. And I've sat on a neighbor's point in a little shack on Pine Point, and one of those boats goes by, and everybody in it, you have to get up and run back onto the grass, because it's a flat wall coming down, and that wave almost completely breaks into that little house. And I don't know what the answer to that is, because the boats are specifically, they go at about 1/3 of the speed of a ski boat, specifically to keep them off plane, to make sure they push, like a snowplow, as big a wake as possible. That's totally inconsistent with don't rock the boat, don't rock the dock, don't everything. And those things will go, that wake, it's so intense, they can be 150, 200 feet out, and that wave still will not dissipate when it hits shore, erosion, everything else. I hope that the commission and working with law enforcement takes a real look at that. I don't know what the answer to it, but it's causing a lot of grief for a lot of people.
Just one final comment relative to personal watercraft. I just want to remind folks, we are the only state in the nation that does not allow towing behind a personal watercraft, towing water skiers, tubers, or any other similar type device, regardless of the size of the personal watercraft. If it's a PWC, by definition, it's one that can be set on versus set in. If that makes any sense. So regardless whether or not it can carry up to 3 passengers, this state has chosen to not allow the towing with that particular device on the Commonwealth waters. Again, I'd like to thank the Commission for allowing us to come in. I hope we've been of assistance to you. The best advice I can tell you is an informed boater is our best customer. And again, as the Lieutenant has alluded, we hope for a very safe and enjoyable summer from your perspective and from our perspective. Again, if we can reference anything that will hopefully add any clarity, please visit the Massachusetts Environmental Police on their website. Our information there relative to all the rules and regulations as it pertains to boating, how to access a boating safety course, how to create create that opportunity for you as a community. Please reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to come up. We've just run one here recently. We'll be working with the police department this summer, and we look forward to seeing you out on the water. Thank you.
Eric, thank you all for coming. I know it's a long way and it's late at night, so thank you very much. One quick question based on what you just said. We ran the boating safety course last summer or last spring for 25 people. It was very successful, well received. You're going to run one for the police. Are residents going to be able to sign up for that too? No, that's just for the police.
We already had one open to the public, and now
that was last year.
No, we did one month ago.
Oh, I didn't know about that. Okay, we didn't know about it. Excellent. Next spring. So thank you for coming, everybody. I'm going to call this meeting to an end.
My meeting adjourned.
You know, every time we do a class, somebody goes, hey, when's your next class?